Good morning. Great to see a nice, cosy turnout. The group intimacy in the settings. I was just actually talking to Alan there before we kicked off, and we were just talking about the first ever CETA event. And I actually spoke at the first ever CETA event around 2000. If that's not, it was around that time, around 2000, yeah, with my original company, which I'll talk a little bit about today as well. I'm going to talk a bit, just going to cover what's in the agenda. I'm just going to introduce you to Fenestra Pro and what we're doing around that. I'll introduce you to myself properly in a moment. I'll talk about our kind of core product, Fenestra Pro Premium, which is a design tool for architects predominantly. We've recently entered a partnership agreement with Autodesk where we're doing a lot of work in relation to Project Quantum. And Project Quantum is Autodesk's switch from effectively file management into kind of central data models and data storage. It's a platform that's built on the Forge platform using HFDM, which is high frequency data management, and we're doing some work around that with manufacturers. And I'll just talk about where we see that going with regards to linking in design information, fabrication information and construction information back into the design process. So hopefully I won't bore you too much with it. Just in terms of my own background, I'm here as the founder and CEO of Fenestra Pro, but I'm actually also a lecturer in DIT. I lecture in the School of Architecture and Architectural Technology and Architecture. And you know, I suppose going back to the 2000 that I alluded to a moment ago, in 2000, around that time, I had founded a company called Build Online, and Build Online was a file and document management system for the construction industry. So I was involved in that from the very start as well. So that's kind of, since then, since Build Online, I was working as an architectural technologist in my own practice, and that was where we kind of conceptualized the idea for Fenestra Pro, which actually came as a result of research. And I did a master's in facade engineering at the University of Bath, and it was the research from that led to the concept of Fenestra Pro. I suppose, talking about what Fenestra Pro is, we describe ourselves as a SaaS business, developing software applications in the BIM space for AEC. Our core product, which I'm going to show you a bit about on now, is a facade design tool that enables architects to design more energy efficient building facades more cost effectively. Since our full release earlier this year, we've around 30 client firms, including the top 5 architectural firms globally as well. So our predominant market is the US, and we've been doing a lot of work over there. I mentioned earlier on, we now have a partnership agreement with Autodesk, where we're doing some work around Project Quantum. And that's kind of given us some visibility in terms of future opportunities, in terms of how you manage data in the workflow. So let me, bear with me a moment while I talk about our core product, which is Fenestra Pro Premium. As I said, it's a design tool, and it's very much focused on things like thermal performance, passive solar heat gain, daylighting. So it gives architects visibility over the impact of their design decisions from the earliest point in the design process. We're an add-in for Revit, and that gives us an ability to, you know, because we live in Revit, you don't have to take models out of the workflow and bring them into another program and do analysis and go back and change them and all that kind of stuff. But we also have an opportunity to do we're doing some work around the idea of generative design. So as an architect, you can set performance levels for spaces or for floors or for rooms or for facades, and we'll automatically generate the facade for the architect. We've got no direct competition. There are analysis tools out there, the likes of Insight 360 or Saphira or IES, for example, but we're very much complementary because we could be used much earlier in the process. And we work, as I mentioned, closely with Autodesk in terms of that complementary nature of the kind of early stage design around the facade with the likes of Insight when you get into doing your full end energy analysis, as they describe it. In terms of what value we offer our customers, you know, by giving architects the ability to understand their design decisions and strip out a lot of the complexities that are typically associated with HVAC and lighting and stuff like that, and systems and boilers. You know, you're giving architects the tools to understand the impact of their design decision. And if you think about it this way, the facade, which is the primary moderator between your internal and external environment, and influences over 50% of the energy performance of the building. But it's also the realization of the building. So as coming from an architectural background, what we've tried to do is look to marry performance in with the desired aesthetic effectively. But by giving architects the understanding of those implications early in the process, it improves their process. They effectively eliminate that requirement for late stage redesign once the clever engineers get involved and actually start looking at, you know, what impact the facade is having on the building, there's no need for them to, because they have a good understanding of the performance of the facade, they don't have to redesign. So it's a good improvement. From an architect's point of view, one of the softer benefits we see to Fenestra Pro is that it gives them the ability to maintain control over the aesthetic, but also enables them to review compliance from that early stage. And one of the key things from our point of view is that our software is really easy to use, and because we strip out a lot of the complexities that I mentioned earlier on, it means that it's available to the full design team. I mentioned the fact that we're an add-in for Revit, and that enables us to read from, but also write to the model. So as you're establishing these kind of key design parameters that I spoke about, we see ourselves as leading the way in generative design. So in other words, you can set performance criteria, you can establish what your configuration of your glazing is to meet the aesthetic, and then you can actually work from there to make sure that you're automatically generating facade solutions. You'll see that in the quick demonstration I have here. We work from the earliest point of the process, so through the kind of conceptual design, with the conceptual design tools in Revit, all the way up to the detailed design. In the conceptual tools, we're very much focused on establishing your glass to wall ratio based on thermal performance. We look at how you optimize the distribution of your glass, depending on its orientation, location, the impact of surrounding buildings, to maximize the passive heat gains, but also maintaining your daylight levels as well. In the detail model, we're very much focused around, you're moving from conceptual where you don't necessarily have elements within the model to a detail model where each window has a performance criteria typically set in the analytical properties. And again, becomes about the specification of the glass and what kind of shading you need based on those kind of things. And also then, a big part of what we're doing is produce data. So we use the Forge platform to present the kind of our key findings in terms of the data that's being highlighted in terms of heat gain, daylighting levels and so on. And then we also have an Excel export function that gives you an ability to report back to clients and stuff like that. The best way to talk about Fenestra is just give you a quick demo, a quick 2-minute video that I can talk through as we go. Once it plays, there we go, we've got. As I mentioned, we work very much in that early stage piece, so again, in the conceptual design tools within Revit, and what we're doing within that is looking to establish, based on your typical kind of high-level U values for your roof, your floor, it takes it out, gives you the U value for the facade in itself. When you put your glass performance levels and your wall performance levels, it tells you what your glass to wall ratio is. And then, as I mentioned, you can probably see it there. As you start making those changes, it writes it directly to the conceptual model in this case. You can start looking at then the impact of shading devices, and as you change the shading within Fenestra Pro, the impacts of that can be seen when you recalculate. So you'll see constantly where you can see your thermal performance levels, your daylight levels, and your passive solar heat gain. When you move into the detail model, we're very much around how you manage specification of materials. And this kind of is appropriate for the work that we're doing around quantum, whereby you can select the glass material, and this is all managed through the analytical properties within Revit, so using the construction's XML file. And I'd say that because it's relevant to the rest of the presentation, whereby you can change the glass and you can look at the impact those changes have on heat gain and daylighting and so on. And around that as well, then you can, as I mentioned, as I showed earlier on, you can export Excel information, which gives you the daylight, so the heat gain levels, your daylight levels for each surface, for each orientation, for each facade. I mentioned this is how we present the data that we're looking at on the actual model, so using the Forge platform in terms of how you export and manage that information. And that's also some of the work that we're doing around quantum, which I'll touch on again in a moment. We talked about the generative design. So the idea here is you've got a building where you don't have any windows on, let's say 2 of the facades. You can select both those facades and then choose to add a window, and you can look at percentage glazing, or you can look at maximum or target heat loads. So you can put your heat load requirement in, you can preview what the glazing, then you can start putting in configurations for your glazing. So in this instance, putting in 1 meter by 2 meters, and you get an idea of how the buildings look. You can change that, and then it automatically generates the glazing from the Fenestra Pro family onto the model, whereby then you can get an understanding of the performance levels associated with that in terms of heat gain as well as daylight and thermal performance. So that kind of gives you an overview of what we're doing with Fenestra Pro in terms of the current software. I mentioned earlier on that we have some of the leading firms. We've got the top 5 global firms in the US using the software against their AECOM, IBI, Perkins Will, HOK. We also got a wide range of clients, the US, the UK, Scandinavia, and our friends in O'Mahony Pike here in Ireland are using the software also. I mentioned this partnership with Autodesk, and I'm not here to promote Autodesk, but just to kind of give you an idea, we have an industry partnership where we have a sales and marketing agreement partnership, development partnership, and that development partnership is focused around quantum, which I'm going to talk about briefly now. So we've built a core product for that, which we launched at Autodesk University in Las Vegas about 3 weeks ago, and I'm going to show you some of the stuff that we're doing around that. For those of you who don't know quantum, and quantum, sometimes I ask myself, do Autodesk really know what quantum is, to be perfectly honest, but to give you an idea what quantum is, it's moving from file sharing to, file-based sharing, where you've got a Revit file that you're sharing using, whatever it might be, BIM 360, to a central data model. So simultaneously, where you have your Revit model open, there's a live data transfer link to a central database that contains all the information. So as an architect, when you change a wall, it changes on the central data model. And that gives an, an opportunity to link in with fabrication and construction. And what I mean by that is, as you know in a Revit, if you get into too much detail within Revit, so for example, if you take the curtain wall example, whereby you might have a fairly sophisticated mullion or transom where it has a significant configuration. If you put that into Revit and you have a lot of curtain wall, it's a file killer. It slows the file down. But if you think about it this way, what quantum will offer you is the ability to put a simplified version of that mullion or transom into Revit, while simultaneously presenting a more sophisticated version of that data in fabrication and construction. So for example, with Fusion or Inventor, the same information is available. If something changes and you get into the detail using the fabrication tools, that information is fed back to the central data model, which is available in a simplified version within Revit. The important thing that Autodesk say, it's not a Revit killer. Revit is still very much the editing tools that are used for managing the data. But I suppose effectively what it's doing is it's providing more sophisticated data to all the various constituents of the construction industry. So we're very much plugged into the quantum environment. We've developed a tool within that, and I'll talk a bit about that. And the idea there is what we're able to do is, from the generative design perspective, we're able to set out criteria or a set of rules for design that feeds back, it's fed from the construction or fabrication. So if you think about it this way, if you're looking to automatically generate a curtain wall system, there's certain rules in terms of, for example, the availability of glass in your area, what size glass panel, what size insulated panel you get within the curtain wall, which drives the center lines of your grid from your transoms and your mullions. Similarly with what's your transom lengths and your mullion lengths, and that fits back into the design process. So we're feeding that information to architects almost by osmosis, whereby they don't necessarily realise they're getting these sets of rules that are being applied to the generative design solution that we're working on at the moment. And again, the idea is that you take something from quantum in Revit, it's a simplified version, and the more sophisticated version is available for fabrication. And again, it pulls all those bits of workflow in. To talk specifically, and when we talk about quantum and when Autodesk talk about quantum and this data sharing module within that, there's something that it's not very tangible. You don't really see quantum, it's in the background, it's providing the information. But actually what we've actually built is, we've looked at how we manage the construction data. So for those of you who are obviously familiar with Revit, when you have a material or a property or element within Revit, the analytical data that we use for Fenestra Pro and GBS and Insight is controlled through the construction's XML file. That is fed into software like ours for calculating the kind of thermal, solar and daylighting performance. But the problem is you can't feed that information back, so it's a one-way path. The other problem with it is that the construction's XML is hard-coded in Revit. It hasn't been updated in about 10 years, so it's very much out of date. What we've done is we've built a constructions add-in called Fenestra Pro Link, and that basically overrides the constructions XML file. But it also live links through quantum, through this high-frequency data management, to a quantum-based or cloud-based database that provides the information back into the constructions add-in, fed through Forge, the Forge platform, and then back into Revit. And that's all managed around the quantum environment. Again, probably the best way to demonstrate this is to show you a quick video to give you an idea of what we've built. So you've got this idea whereby, as I mentioned, you've got a constructions add-in So when you open Revit, you have the constructions add-in. That information there is live linked to the Quantum database. So when you change something on the Quantum database, it automatically, you're not downloading or uploading information. When you have your database, the linked databases we have on Quantum here, you've got all that. In this instance, you've got the glazing information. So we're talking about, we're very much focused on delivering a solution for glass manufacturers, whereby you can search based on performance criteria such as U value for the glazing, solar heat gain coefficient, or visual light transmittance. So when you start looking at alternatives within that, and you can manipulate and navigate your way around the glazing database based on the performance of the glass predominantly, but also linking in with manufacturers and that sort of stuff. You can choose your glass at this point, and then it's available to the Revit user in a live link in Revit. And what we're doing with this is we're making this available to architectural firms, but in a way that they can manage their information. So there'll be an administrator where he can control the data flow to the users within a firm, and this information then is made available in Revit. You can also add in your own glass types, so beyond the manufacturer's information of the information that's available through the database, you can create your own glass types within firms. And as you do that, then you might go onto a Pilkingtons or a Saint-Gobain, and you might use a product selector to select the glass type, and then you can put in the name of the glass, the manufacturer description, and the kind of three criteria in this instance, which is U value, solar heat gain coefficient, visual light transmittance of the glass, and that feeds back in then to the general design. So when you're looking for a glass, you'll be, you're looking to get a certain performance level from your glass, and that performance level will feed into the database and limit the selection of the glass down to 3 or 4 different glass types, 3 or 4 different manufacturers, and that's what you would then use to specify the glass. So you're talking about appropriate selection. Now, I mentioned earlier on, we've taken a thin slice with the glazing. So as you create 2 new glass types in this instance, when you go back into Revit, into the constructions add-in, the 2 new glass types that are created in the database automatically appear here. And when it gets interesting is that you can apply that glass, and it applies it back into the analytical properties for that material. And then you can obviously use software like Fenestra Pro or Insight 360 or GBS to actually fully test that glass. And where it gets interesting, and this is where Quantum offers good value in terms of what it does, it's also got a link to Forge. And Forge is a platform, so Revit, it's not for Revit users, it's for the wider base of potential users. So it's accessible by contractors, manufacturers, subcontractors, whatever it might be. And again, what we've built at the moment is the ability to live link into Forge, which is an online platform that takes the model, brings it in, you'll see it in a moment, and then within that model you can actually start changing the glass specification within that and recommend those changes. So here's a simplified version of the model within Forge. You can go into you can select the panel, you can change the glass for that. You can apply it, and what you're doing is you're applying from a web-based solution or web-based platform, and it applies it back into Revit, and you can actually change your glass specification from Revit. So what I'm showing you here is really a beta version of what we're working with some of the leading manufacturers and architectural firms globally to beta test and to implement this over the next while. We'll extend it from glass into multiple product systems. The next piece obviously will be curtain wall systems, mullions, transoms, all that kind of stuff. And I think that kind of hopefully gives you a bit of an idea. And what we're doing with Autodesk, and again I'm conscious that I am talking a lot about what we're doing with Autodesk, but it links in things like Revit, Forge, GBS, Insight 360, and Fenestra Pro. And really, where we're going to take that, we're beta testing and launching Fenestra Pro Link at the moment. A big part of the play is that design link, design make connection, whereby we're going to provide that more detailed design data from fabrication into design. We're expanding that from glazing systems into walls, roofs, and floors, etc. And then I mentioned earlier on, using the rules that are selected within the database for controlling that data, the fabrication rules or construction rules around that, automatically fed back into that general design piece. So when you're generating a curtain wall, you're doing that within a confines of certain rules. And I suppose where we're kind of taking that is the ability to actually bring in products like Inventor and Fusion into the design process more than what's been done in the past. And that gives you the ability to actually detail more sophisticated systems. So hopefully that gives you an idea about what we're doing on Quantum, some data management information and the future of data management information. And I think we can take some questions in the Q&A, but for now I'll leave it at that. So 20 minutes. 15 seconds short, so I'll just sing a song for 15 seconds. Thanks very much.